Damon Cross was used to trouble. As a former Earth mercenary turned independent trader, he had fought in wars, outrun pirates, and sweet-talked his way out of impossible situations. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this. He stood at the edge of a smoking crater, staring at the unconscious figure inside. His ship's scanners had picked up the wreckage of a single-person escape pod, and curiosity had led him here. Now, against all logic, he was looking at what seemed to be a Xal'Kur warrior, a race known for their pride, strength, and tendency to settle disputes with blades instead of words. Damon let out a sigh. Why me? The woman stirred. Her breathing was shallow, her armor cracked from the impact. Damon wasn't a hero, but he wasn't heartless either. With a groan, he crouched down, carefully pulling her from the wreckage. The moment he touched her, her eyes snapped open. Faster than he could react, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it with surprising strength. Instinctively, Damon pulled back, but she held on like a vice. Then, just as quickly as she attacked, her grip weakened and she slumped forward, barely conscious. She mumbled something in her native tongue, harsh, clipped syllables that he didn't understand. Then, her voice grew steadier. I beg you. Her words were thick with exhaustion, but her meaning was clear. Take me, as your servant. Damon blinked. What? This had to be some kind of concussion-induced delirium. He looked around, expecting an ambush, but there was nothing, just the distant hum of desert winds across the barren wasteland. He turned back to her. Look, lady, I think you hit your head. I am serious, she rasped, struggling to sit up. By the warrior's code, I have no home, no clan, no honor, but if you accept me, I can still serve. I must serve. Damon let out a short laugh. You're joking. Her deadly glare told him she wasn't. He rubbed his face, exhaling slowly. Let me get this straight. You crash land in the middle of nowhere, almost die, and now you want to be my servant. He shook his head. That's crazy. I don't need a servant. The woman's expression darkened, her eyes burning with something fierce. Then you are leaving me to die. Damon stiffened. That wasn't what he meant, but looking at her now, battered, vulnerable, and yet still radiating the same warrior pride that made her people famous, he realized something. She wasn't begging for survival, she was begging for purpose. And that was harder to refuse. Before he could think of a response, the sound of approaching engines roared in the distance. Damon's instincts flared. Someone was coming. The woman turned her head slightly, listening. Then she spat a curse under her breath. They have come for me. Damon narrowed his eyes. Who? She pushed herself upright, wincing from the pain. Xal'Kur warriors. If they find me in this state, I am as good as dead. Damon groaned. He didn't have time for this, but leaving her here meant handing her over to people who clearly weren't her friends. With an exasperated sigh, he reached down and pulled her onto his feet. Fine, we'll argue about this later. Right now, we'd run. The woman looked at him for a long second, then nodded. Together, they sprinted toward Damon's ship, the sound of pursuers closing in behind them. Trouble had found him again, and this time, it had amber eyes and a warrior's pride. Damon tightened his grip on the woman's arm as they ran. His ship wasn't far, but the roar of engines behind them was getting closer. Can you fight? He asked, glancing at her. She straightened, despite the pain. Always. He had no reason to trust her, but something about the way she said it told him she wasn't lying. The dusty ground trembled as two sleek, black hoverbikes appeared on the ridge behind them. The riders wore battle-scarred armor, their visors glowing red. One raised a weapon. Down, Damon shouted, shoving the woman aside as a plasma shot exploded where they had been standing. Rolling to his feet, Damon pulled out his pulse pistol and fired back. His shots weren't meant to hit, just to slow them down. The woman, however, had other plans. She yanked a blade from the sheath on her hip, a long curved weapon that shimmered with energy. Before Damon could stop her, she charged straight at the nearest rider. Wait, are you insane? But she was already moving. The rider fired, but she twisted midair, dodging with perfect precision. Her blade slashed down in a single strike. Sparks flew as the bike's engine was cut clean in half. The rider crashed hard, rolling across the ground. Damon whistled. "Remind me never to make you mad." The second attacker swerved toward her, a stun baton crackling in his grip. Damon didn't give him the chance. He raised his pistol, aimed for the bike's stabilizer, and fired. The shot hit home, sending the vehicle spinning out of control. The rider tumbled into the dirt. Dust and silence settled over the battlefield. The woman stood over her fallen enemies, breathing heavily, her grip on her blade steady. Damon holstered his pistol. Well, that was dramatic. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I told you, I can fight." He smirked. "Yeah, I got that part loud and clear." They didn't have time to waste. More would come. Damon motioned toward his ship, parked just over the ridge. "Let's move." By the time they reached the ship, the woman's strength was fading again. She barely made it up the loading ramp before collapsing onto a crate. Damon sealed the doors, rushed to the cockpit, and powered up the engines. The moment they lifted off, his radar lit up with multiple hostile signatures. He muttered a curse. "Looks like you have a lot of enemies." The woman, still catching her breath, steadied herself against the wall. "They will not stop." Damon glanced at her, then back at the controls. He should just drop her off somewhere safe. This wasn't his problem. But something about the way she sat there, battered yet unyielding, made him pause. He sighed. "All right, warrior lady, you've got a name." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "Saria." Damon nodded. "Damon Cross. You're lucky I was feeling generous today." Saria tilted her head. "No, you are lucky. You now have a Xalkur warrior in your debt." Damon chuckled. "Right, because that always ends well." Saria didn't smile, but there was something softer in her eyes. "You saved my life. I will not forget it." Damon wasn't sure why that made his chest feel tight. Before he could say something dumb, the ship's alarm beeped. More hostiles incoming. He grinned. "Guess we'll see how lucky I really am." With a sharp turn, he sent the ship soaring into the stars, dragging both of them into trouble neither had planned for. The ship rattled as Damon pushed the thrusters to full power. He gritted his teeth, eyes locked on the control panel. 3 enemy ships were closing in fast. Saria sat behind him, her breathing steady despite the chaos. "Are we armed?" she asked. Damon scoffed. "Not well enough for a dogfight. We need to outrun them." He yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive. Plasma blasts whizzed past the hull, shaking the cabin. Saria studied the radar, then frowned. "They are hurting us." Damon's fingers tightened on the throttle. She was right. The enemy ships weren't just attacking. They were steering him toward something. And then he saw it. A massive war cruiser loomed ahead, its dark hull blocking the stars. Damon cursed under his breath. "They've got a blockade." Saria's expression hardened. "If they capture us, they will kill you." Damon let out a nervous chuckle. "Great. Love being popular." But Saria wasn't joking. "I will not allow it." Damon glanced at her. "And what are you gonna do? Take on an entire fleet with your sword?" She didn't blink. "Yes." He sighed. "You really are insane." Before she could respond, a voice crackled through the ship's comms. "Unidentified vessel, power down and prepare to be boarded." Damon's hands hovered over the controls. Running wasn't an option. Fighting was suicide. Then Saria spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Let me speak." Damon hesitated. "You think they'll listen?" She met his gaze. "They will listen to me." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine. With a sigh, he activated the comms. "Go ahead, warrior lady." Saria stepped forward, her posture straight. "This is Saria of the Xalkur. I invoke the right of Karish." Silence. Then, a different voice replied, one filled with disbelief. "Impossible. The right has not been invoked in a century." Damon frowned. Should I be worried?" Saria ignored him. "The right is my right by blood and blade. You will honor it." A long pause. Then, "The warship's weapons powered down. You will dock immediately," the voice said. Damon blinked. "Wait, what just happened?" Saria exhaled. "We are safe, for now." Damon ran a hand through his hair. Define safe. Sarya's expression darkened. We are going to meet my people. The docking bay was eerily quiet as Damon followed Sarya down the ramp. Warriors in dark armor lined the walls, their glowing visors locked on him. Damon leaned in. So, should I bow or something? Sarya didn't look at him. Do not show weakness. Right, no weakness. Got it. At the far end of the bay, a figure stepped forward. Unlike the others, he wore no helmet. His sharp gaze landed on Sarya. Sarya, he said, his voice cold, you return in disgrace. Sarya stood tall. I return in honor. The man's eyes flicked to Damon. With a human? Damon raised a hand. Hi. Sarya's voice was firm. This human saved my life. I owe him a warrior's debt. The warriors around them stirred. Damon cleared his throat. Okay, let's clarify. I happened to be there. No debts needed. The man's eyes burned into him. You do not understand what you have done. Damon sighed. I get that a lot. Sarya stepped closer. I have invoked the right of Karish. Gasps rippled through the warriors. The man's expression darkened. You would bind yourself to a human? Sarya didn't hesitate. I would. Damon blinked. Wait. What? The man's jaw tightened. Then he must prove himself. Damon groaned. Of course I must. Sarya turned to him. Do not fail. He rubbed his temples. You're really bad at pep talks. The warriors parted, revealing an open arena. Damon sighed. All right, let's see what I'm up against. And then the doors opened. Damon stared at the massive arena before him. The stone floor was cracked and scarred from battles long past. Above, warriors lined the high walls, their glowing visors fixed on him. The tension in the air was thick. He exhaled. All right, let's get this over with. Sarya stood beside him, her posture rigid. You must prove yourself in combat. Damon rolled his shoulders. Yeah, I figured. The warrior leader, the man who had questioned Sarya's honor, stepped forward. His piercing eyes locked onto Damon. The trial of strength is simple. Survive. Damon frowned. That's not exactly reassuring. The warriors around them stomped their feet in unison. A deep, echoing boom filled the arena. Then, the massive iron doors across from him rumbled open. Damon braced himself. He expected a warrior to step forward, maybe some elite soldier ready to pound him into the ground. Instead, something much worse emerged. A beast. It was massive, easily 3 times his size, with dark, armored scales and glowing red eyes. Clawed feet scraped against the ground, and thick tendrils slithered from its back, twitching with unnatural speed. It let out a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down Damon's spine. He swallowed hard. You have got to be kidding me. Sarya's voice was firm. Do not run. Damon huffed, not planning to, just reconsidering my life choices. The beast lunged. Damon barely had time to roll to the side as a massive claw smashed into the ground where he had been standing. Stone shattered, sending debris flying. He scrambled to his feet. Okay, think, Damon, think. No weapons, no armor, just my. The beast roared and charged again. Damon did the only thing he could. He ran straight toward it. Gasps echoed through the arena. The warriors hadn't expected that. Neither had the beast. At the last second, Damon slid under its legs, using the slick arena floor to his advantage. The beast skidded, trying to turn, but its own weight worked against it. Damon sprang up behind it, looking for something, anything, he could use. His eyes landed on a jagged spear sticking out of the broken ground. With no time to think, he grabbed it. The beast spun, its tendrils lashing out. One wrapped around his arm, yanking him off his feet. Sarya took a step forward, her fingers twitching toward her weapon. But she didn't move. This was his fight. Damon gritted his teeth as the tendrils squeezed tighter. He raised the spear, and with all his strength, stabbed. The beast howled as the spear sank into its shoulder. Its grip loosened. Damon twisted the weapon, using its own weight against it. The creature toppled to the ground with a thunderous crash. Silence. Then, a single stomp. Another. The warriors pounded the ground in rhythm, their version of applause. Damon, breathing heavily, dropped the spear. Yeah, that's right. Who's the weak human now? The warrior leader stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. You have proven yourself. Damon blinked. Wait, really? That's it? Saria turned to him. You survived. That is enough. The warrior leader faced Saria. You would still claim this human? Her voice was steady. I would. Damon cleared his throat. Bah, should I have a say in? Saria grabbed his wrist, lifting his arm high. Then let it be known. By the right of Karish, we are bound. The warriors let out a deafening roar of approval. Damon stared at her. Wait, bound, as in? Saria met his gaze. You are mine now, human. His heart skipped. Oh. He wasn't sure if he should be thrilled or terrified. Damon sat on the edge of a stone bench, rubbing his temples. His body ached from the fight, and his mind still spun from Saria's bold declaration. Bound. The word echoed in his head. He wasn't sure if it meant marriage, servitude, or something else entirely. Saria stood beside him, her expression unreadable as always. The warriors around them had dispersed, though a few still watched from a distance. Some nodded in approval, others seemed amused. Damon sighed. Okay, Saria, just to clarify, what exactly does bound mean? She tilted her head. It means you are mine. He gave a short laugh. Yeah, you said that, but mine how? She folded her arms. By the right of Karish, you have proven strength. A warrior does not waste what they have won. You are now under my protection, and I under yours. Damon squinted. That sounds suspiciously like a marriage contract. Saria didn't flinch. It is a sacred bond. His stomach flipped. Oh, wow. Before he could say anything else, a deep voice interrupted. The human still breathes. Damon turned to see the same warrior leader from earlier. He approached with slow, measured steps, eyes locked on Damon like a scientist studying an unusual creature. Saria straightened. He fought with honor. The warrior leader gave a low hum, perhaps, but he does not understand our ways. Damon forced a smile. Hey, I'm trying here. The warrior leader ignored him. Saria, you know what must be done. Saria gave a firm nod. Damon frowned. Wait, what must be done? I'm not fighting another monster, am I? She turned to him. You must take part in the binding rite. His stomach twisted. That, sounds permanent. The warrior leader smirked. It is. Saria placed a hand on Damon's chest. It wasn't a forceful touch, just firm enough to hold his attention. You do not have to accept, she said, her voice quieter now. If you refuse, I will take no offense. But if you stay, you must honor our ways. Damon swallowed hard. The easy thing would be to back out. He could walk away, find another way off this planet, and never look back. But the thought of leaving Saria behind made his chest tighten. She had fought for him, trusted him, and stood by him even when her people doubted him. And despite the insanity of all this, he liked her. Damon took a deep breath. All right, what do I have to do? A flicker of something, approval, crossed Saria's face. The warrior leader gestured to the center of the arena, where a glowing insignia had been carved into the ground. You must kneel before her, he said, and swear the vow. Damon hesitated. That's it. The warrior leader chuckled. You will see. Saria stepped into the glowing circle and turned to face him. Damon exhaled. His heart pounded as he stepped forward. The moment he crossed into the circle, the ground beneath him pulsed with energy. He dropped to one knee, looking up at Saria. She extended her hand. Will you fight beside me? Will you stand with me when war comes? Will you honor the bond? Damon's throat felt dry. He glanced at the warriors watching, then back at Saria. His lips curled into a small smile. Yeah, I will. The glow beneath them flared, engulfing them both in light. And just like that, it was done. The glow slowly faded, but the energy in the air still crackled around them. Damon could feel it. Something had changed. The watching warriors murmured among themselves, some nodding in approval, others exchanging curious glances. Saria remained still, her eyes locked onto his, her hand still extended toward him. Damon finally exhaled and took her hand. Her grip was strong, steady. "So, that's it?" he asked, his voice low. Saria's lips twitched in the smallest hint of a smile. "That is it." Damon stood, his legs still feeling slightly unsteady. No sudden duels. No crazy battle challenges. The warrior leader chuckled. "You misunderstand, human. The true challenge begins now." Damon blinked. "Of course it does." Saria stepped closer to him. "We must leave. There will be those who oppose our bond. We must be prepared." Damon frowned. "Oppose it? Why?" Before she could answer, a sharp voice cut through the murmurs. "This is a disgrace." A tall warrior strode toward them, his expression thunderous. His armor gleamed under the artificial lights of the arena, and his piercing gaze settled on Damon with open hostility. Saria's hand tensed around Damon's. "Kaler," she said, her voice cool. Damon instantly disliked the guy. Maybe it was the way he held himself, like he expected everyone to bow before him. Or maybe it was the barely concealed rage in his eyes. Kaler scoffed. "You insult our traditions, Saria, binding yourself to this." He didn't even look at Damon, like he wasn't worth acknowledging. Damon sighed. "Yep, here we go." Saria took a step forward. Damon has earned his place. Kaler's jaw tightened. "This is an insult. You should have chosen me." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Wait, was this a competition? Because nobody told me I was signing up for a love triangle." Kaler's eyes narrowed. "You will never understand our ways, human. Saria deserves a warrior of honor, not a fragile outsider." Damon crossed his arms. "Hey, I may be an outsider, but I'm not fragile. You want to test that theory?" Saria placed a hand on his chest, stopping him from stepping forward. Kaler sneered. "You think you are her equal? Prove it." Damon groaned. "Seriously, I just finished proving myself." Kaler ignored him. "One final challenge. If you truly deserve her, you will fight for her." Saria's grip on Damon's arm tightened. "No, this is foolishness." Kaler smirked. "Then let him run. Let him show us all that he is nothing." Damon rolled his shoulders. "All right, fine. Let's settle this." Saria turned to him sharply. "Damon, you don't need to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." Kaler's smirk widened. "Very well." The warriors around them stepped back, clearing space. Damon took a deep breath, shaking out his arms. He wasn't stupid. Kaler was stronger, faster, and trained for battle since birth. But Damon had one thing going for him. He was stubborn as hell. The moment Kaler lunged, Damon moved. He ducked under the first swing, twisting to the side. Kaler was fast, but Damon was quicker. He had no chance of overpowering him, but outmaneuvering him, that was possible. Kaler swung again, and Damon barely dodged. He had to stay moving. One hit, and it was over. He spotted an opening and took it. He kicked out, striking Kaler's knee. It wasn't enough to bring him down, but it staggered him. Kaler growled, "You fight like a coward." Damon grinned, "I fight to win." Kaler charged again, but this time, Damon was ready. He sidestepped at the last second, sending Kaler crashing to the ground. Before the warrior could recover, Damon was on him, pressing his knee against his back. "Yield," Damon said. Kaler struggled, but Damon kept him pinned. Finally, with a frustrated growl, Kaler stilled. The arena was silent. Then, one by one, the warriors nodded in approval. Damon stepped back, letting Kaler rise. Saria stepped beside Damon. "It is done." Kaler's expression was unreadable. Then, with a sharp nod, he turned and walked away. Damon let out a breath. That was exhausting. Saria smirked. "You did well." Damon glanced at her. "Yeah." She nodded. "Yes." And for the first time, Damon saw it, the admiration in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't just an outsider anymore. The crowd slowly dispersed after Damon's unexpected victory. Warriors whispered among themselves, casting him thoughtful glances. Some nodded in respect, others in amusement, but no one doubted him anymore. He wasn't just the strange human who had stumbled into their world. He was now part of it. "So," he said, brushing some dust off his sleeve, "did I pass the final test, or is there another secret challenge I don't know about?" Saria let out a soft chuckle. "You have done enough." Damon smirked. "Glad to hear it, because I'm running out of energy, and I'd rather not wrestle another alien warrior today." She studied him for a long moment. "You surprised them." He raised an eyebrow. "And you?" Saria tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps." Damon grinned. "I'll take that as a win." Before she could respond, a low chime echoed through the air. Saria's expression hardened immediately. Damon recognized that look. Trouble was coming. "What now?" he asked. Saria turned to one of the older warriors nearby. "The council calls for us." The warrior nodded solemnly. "They demand an answer." Damon frowned. "Answer to what?" Saria hesitated, then met his gaze. "Our bond. They must decide if it will be recognized." Damon exhaled. "Great. More politics." She turned, motioning for him to follow. He fell into step beside her, lowering his voice. "Be honest with me. How bad is this?" Saria's expression was unreadable. "They will test us, Damon, but I will not let them take this choice from me." His chest tightened at her words. She had always been strong, but there was something different in her voice now, something personal. For the first time, he realized what this truly meant for her. This wasn't just about him proving himself. This was about her standing against her own people for something she believed in. He reached out, gently taking her hand. She didn't pull away. "Then let's face them together," he said. She glanced at him, something soft flickering in her eyes before she nodded. They walked through the grand halls of the fortress, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Finally, they entered the chamber. A semicircle of elders sat before them, their robes flowing like shadows. Their gazes bore into Damon with silent judgment. One of them, an elder with silver streaks in his dark hair, spoke first. "Saria, you bring this human before us and claim him as your bondmate." Saria stood tall. "Yes." The elder's sharp gaze flickered to Damon. "You fought well today, human, but strength alone does not prove worth." Damon folded his arms. "Then what does?" Another elder leaned forward. "Loyalty, honor, a willingness to sacrifice." Damon's jaw tightened. "I've already risked my life for Saria." The first elder's gaze remained unreadable. "Would you do so again?" Damon didn't hesitate. "Yes." A long silence followed. Then the elder nodded slightly. "Then prove it." Before Damon could react, a side door opened, and two guards dragged someone into the chamber. Damon's stomach clenched. It was a captured enemy soldier, bound and bruised. The elder's voice was calm. "This man has wronged our people. He was caught spying for our enemies. The sentence is death." Damon stiffened. "And what does this have to do with me?" The elder's gaze was piercing. "If you wish to be one of us, you must prove your resolve. Deliver the sentence." Damon felt Saria's sharp intake of breath beside him. He turned to her, searching her face for an answer, but she looked just as tense as he felt. He looked back at the prisoner. The man's breathing was shallow, but he met Damon's gaze without fear. Damon clenched his fists. They were testing him, but not in the way he expected. The silence stretched on. Finally, Damon stepped forward. "I won't do it," he said. A murmur swept through the chamber. The elders exchanged glances. Damon stood firm. "If being one of you means killing a defenseless man, then I don't want it." The elder studied him for a long time, then exhaled. "Very well," he said. "That was the test." Damon blinked. "Wait, what?" The elder smiled slightly. "A true warrior does not kill without reason. You have proven yourself, Damon." Saria let out a breath. The elder stood. "Your bond is recognized." Damon barely had time to react before Saria turned to him, and then, without hesitation, she kissed him. The world seemed to stop. Damon's heart pounded as he melted into the kiss, his arms instinctively wrapping around her. It was fierce, full of the tension they had both carried, the battle they had fought to stand side by side. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were blazing. "You belong to me now, Damon," she whispered. Damon grinned. "Yeah, well, I guess that makes two of us." And for the first time since he had arrived on this planet, he finally felt at home. The sun dipped below the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the fortress. Damon stood on the balcony, the cool breeze brushing against his skin. He exhaled slowly, letting the events of the day settle in his mind. It was over. The trials, the tests, the endless questioning of whether he belonged here, he had passed them all. The elders had recognized his bond with Saria, and for the first time since he had arrived in this world, he wasn't just a stranger trying to survive. He was part of something greater. Footsteps approached behind him, light and deliberate. He didn't need to turn around. "I thought you'd be celebrating," Saria said. Damon chuckled. "I guess I'm still letting it sink in." She stepped beside him, gazing at the horizon. "You proved yourself today." "Did I?" He glanced at her. "Or did I just get lucky?" Saria smirked. Luck had nothing to do with it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried distant voices from the lower levels of the fortress, warriors laughing, celebrating. A sense of peace had settled over the stronghold, but Damon knew it wouldn't last forever. "I meant what I said in there," he murmured. "About you. About us." Saria's gaze softened, but there was still something unreadable in her eyes. "And what exactly are we, Damon?" He turned to fully face her. "I don't know yet, but I do know that I'd rather figure it out with you than go back to being alone." She studied him for a long moment, then, without warning, reached out and grasped his hand. "Then stay." Damon squeezed her hand lightly. "I never planned on leaving." A flicker of relief crossed her face, but it was gone just as quickly. Saria wasn't one to show weakness, but Damon had learned to read her in ways others couldn't. He saw the way she held herself, strong but guarded. He knew this wasn't just about him proving himself to the elders. This was about her trusting him enough to let him stay. Suddenly, a deep horn echoed through the fortress, breaking the moment. Damon tensed. "What now?" Saria's expression darkened. A message from the border. She turned, already in motion. Damon followed without hesitation. By the time they reached the war hall, a group of armored warriors had gathered. One of them, a scout, bowed quickly before speaking. "There was an attack on one of our outer villages," he said. "A small force, but fast. They struck without warning and disappeared into the mountains." Damon frowned. "Survivors?" The scout nodded. "A few. They say the attackers moved like ghosts." A murmur ran through the room. Saria's jaw tightened. It wasn't a random raid. Damon folded his arms. "You think they were testing us?" Saria nodded. "Whoever they were, they wanted to send a message." The War Council deliberated for a moment, discussing patrols, defenses, and strategies. But Damon could tell Saria's mind was already elsewhere. She was a warrior first, a leader. And now, with the weight of their bond recognized, she had even more to fight for. Finally, the discussion ended, and the warriors dispersed. Damon walked beside Saria as they left the hall. "You're worried," he said. She exhaled. "There's always another battle, Damon, but this one feels different." Damon thought for a moment. "Then we face it together." She looked at him, and for the first time that night, she smiled. "Yes," she said softly, "together." And as the stars began to fill the sky above them, Damon knew that whatever came next, he was ready.